Hello and welcome to Sounds on the Couch. I am very excited to introduce today's guest to you. Anthea Palmer is the owner of Richmond-based live music venue Jimmy Hornets. To date, she's had an incredible career. She is an artist herself, having been the singer and songwriter for rock band Drama Queen. And then prior to Jimmy Hornets, which she also opened in China as well, she owned and operated the Chandelier Room. She opened Watchtower Studios, a gallery of varying visual arts, and she has worked with many musicians, helping them to progress their own music careers. I am really looking forward to delving into what makes up this incredible woman. So I won't keep you waiting any longer. I'll just bring her up and we can start having a bit of a chat. Hello, Anthea.
Hello. Hi.
Thank you
Nice
so
to
much
meet
for
you.
joining us
Done
today.
too much research.
Oh, I have, yes. I'm a little bit of an online stalker when I'm interviewing people. So I guess first up, before we dive into all the deep questions, you've just been in the process of reopening Jimmy Hornets after Melbourne lockdowns. So how's all of that going?
It's going well. We opened for the first week without live music because we weren't allowed to. So we've only had one full week of our music roster, but so far so good. We had some really busy nights, and I think out of the 6 nights, 2 of them were a little quiet. I know there's some people that still feel a little bit worried about going out in public and being in a sort of a bar environment. So hopefully it'll keep picking up and keep getting better.
All right, excellent. So, I mean, looking at everything you've done, there's so much over your career, as I mentioned before in the introduction, that you have done, and I mean that's just a really quick snapshot. So, I guess as we start, people know you as the owner of Jimmy Hornets in Richmond, but beyond this, you have owned a number of venues and businesses, and you've done so much to help musicians to progress their own careers. And you've been an artist yourself. So if we start there, in the musical sense, you were the singer and songwriter for rock band Drama Queen. What was your experience like being an artist in that rock band?
Well, that was like the mid to late 90s. So it was a really different world then, because the record deal was still the be all and end all. And there wasn't much really you could do as an independent. So, it was very, very different times, obviously. Great experience. Loved it, I sang professionally or semi-professionally for about a decade. And, I loved every minute of it. Wouldn't take any of it back.
Yeah, fantastic. And how did you get to that point? So what was it that inspired you to take music on as a full career at that point?
Always loved music. I've got my family are quite musical, and it was actually compulsory to learn a musical instrument in our house. So, just love singing. It's joyful, and I also love the band dynamic of working with other musicians. You know, that sort of family feeling you get if you've worked together for long enough. I guess just an overall love of music that has never ended. You know, I feel like I still work for music. And just I've moved a bit further away from the performing these days, that's all.
Yeah, but I guess that everything that you have done, or the majority of what I've seen that you've done, is still in that kind of light. It's really to help others to really progress in that musical area. So I guess what was it that inspired you to kind of work with others, both in live music within your venues, but also in coaching others within their music careers? What's inspired you to kind of head down that route?
Yeah, I think I got to a point where even when I was singing and that was my main focus, I always got pulled towards the business side of things. I always ended up, booking the band, being the contact person, doing the marketing. Yeah. And so bit by bit, I realised really that's where my strength and talent was. And so why not use that to help other musicians, and in particular other musicians with far more talent than I had, musical talent than I had. So, that then became the shift, and that became what I focused on. And I mean, like going to live gigs and seeing live music has to be, I mean, the best experience in the world. And so I've always been really passionate about that. And in that, the coaching thing was sort of secondary, but it picked up some momentum as I went along. And even now, I just offer free advice if I can to the musicians that I work with. And sometimes it's not even advice, it's really just some encouragement and support. And, you know, you're really putting your heart and soul on the line, particularly if you're a songwriter. And so I think they really need bolstering up sometimes, and I'm more than happy to be that person for them if I can.
Excellent. And I think it's, you know, it's a really fortunate position to be in, that you've been able to see both sides as well, be the musician and be that live music venue owner, that you can then understand where they're coming from, and you can provide that advice that a lot of people may not be able to. So what do you think, being an operator of a venue like that and seeing so many different musicians come through, is there anything that you think that a lot of musicians could be thinking a lot more about when they're approaching venues to go and play gigs?
Yes, definitely. I think just thinking about their music as a small business in general, and when I do coach, that's, you know, what I used to focus on, because running a venue is running a business, and so I have experience in that, and I'm quite passionate about branding. You know, I brand my venue, and I'm quite passionate about our brand, and so trying to help other musicians think about that. I've got some courses online, and one in particular is called Gig Science, and I got really frustrated with musicians. For instance, musicians that will spend their time and my time in them applying to play at Jimmy Hornet when they've done no research on the venue. They don't realise that they're not appropriate for what we do. So just encouraging musicians to really be more businesslike and more professional about their communication, making sure that they research things, and making live music experience really a more sort of robust, holistic process, where they can use it for networking, you know, use it for marketing materials, for content marketing. And so, yeah, really looking at the gig and the live music process more holistically than I think musicians generally do. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting, because I guess business in itself is such a different thing to the artistic work where we start as musicians. And so where do you think, I mean, you mentioned that you've got your courses, which we can talk more about as well, but where do you think musicians can begin, if they don't have that experience previously, they can begin to start looking at developing those skills?
Well, I think you just have to be prepared to read and research and learn and take some advice, and not just from myself. I mean, there's a lot of music industry coaches out there giving out free information. So I think, you know, just wherever you're up to in the process of your career, get some free advice, read as much as you can, talk to other musicians, particularly other musicians in your genre that are doing well. It's always great to research how they're doing it. What are they putting out there? What does their marketing look like? Where are they playing? Who are they networked with? You can really tap into what other people are doing. And that's a really easy way to start, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's probably a really good point to really start to get into. You are offering some courses as well for free, which people can access. And I'll pop the link in where you can go and find those when you're looking at this this interview. But would you like to maybe go through a little bit about what you are offering for free in those courses?
Yeah, sure. So when I went to China to set up the first Jimmy Hornet venue in China and the tour there, I couldn't, I stopped doing any one-on-one coaching with the musicians that I had been helping. And I decided at that time, particularly because I had a bit of spare time up my sleeve when I first arrived in China, I decided that I would put some of the information that I thought most useful into web-based learning. And originally people were paying for that. They were paying for the courses. And then given COVID and the whole scenario, I thought my courses are just sitting there and I'm not doing much with them. So I thought I'd just release them for free for anybody that might find them useful. And so now they're available now. They're all small video snippets, so they're quite easy to work through. And also people can just look at the units that are of particular interest to them. They don't have to, sit through a very long training if they don't want to. But that's how it came about. I just thought, why not just put them out there for free? Maybe it will help people to reinvigorate their careers now that we can get back on a stage again.
Yeah, and I think the topics that you've chosen to put out there are really timely topics as well, to really get on track. So just for everybody, there's goal setting, music marketing, and tell me if I'm incorrect with this as well, and live performing as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's one called Gig Science that's really just about the holistic view of the gig and how to make the most of live performance. The goal setting one's quite a small course, but I think it's really useful, particularly times like now when you think, how am I going to sort of lever myself back into it after having such a big break? And then the Music Marketing Machine is really about content marketing, but in the context of musicians and how they can manage that and their web presence. Yeah, lots of information.
Yeah, it's great, and it's so generous of you as well. So thank you. If people
sorry, I was just going to say, I'm sorry. I have some concern. The courses, I must say, were written. I can't remember how long ago now. I think 4 years ago. So, of course, internet marketing and social media has moved on a little. So there is like a little caveat with the courses to say that they are a few years old now, but the basis of the information is still true and hasn't changed. So hopefully it'll still be useful.
Absolutely. And I think, marketing, the core of it, the core of it's still the same. Like while we might be going about it differently, we've still got very similar aims. But it's probably a good point. What do you think has changed particularly over the last few years, and what do you think changed a lot? What do you think might change post-COVID as well?
Look, I don't think that much will change post-COVID. I think once, stages are all open, that's a hard one. Obviously, a lot of people are streaming and doing a lot more video and thinking about that a lot more than they ever have before because of the boundaries we've had to put up around ourselves. But I think once the stages are open and we've all moved on, I really feel the same problems will occur for musicians, and that is really being seen and heard above all the noise out there. Even the live streaming, I found it quite overwhelming how many, every time I logged on somewhere, I was invited to a live performance stream. Nobody can sit and, accept all the invitations and support everybody. And I think, again, it's not such an issue for me, but I think it must be very difficult for musicians to try to grab people's attention with so many trying. So I guess there will be a combination of what people have learned in that period about streaming and video, and that will end up being combined in how people run their little music businesses. But otherwise, I like to think that we'll just get back on the stages and we'll be dealing with the same problems that we were pre-COVID, post-COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. From your experience, so both in the venues and some of the coaching that you've done later, what do you think are some of the biggest struggles that you've seen artists having to deal with?
Well, I think keeping their enthusiasm, momentum and self-belief up. Some of the best musicians that I work with, that I consider the most talented with, the most opportunity in front of them, even then at that stage of their careers, just find it, there's so many highs and lows, and they often lose their momentum, lose their way a bit. And unfortunately, that means that time passes without them really pushing forward with their careers. So I really think staying motivated and staying confident in what you're doing is for sure the hardest things that they have to contend with.
And what do you think are some of the some things that maybe people can do to try and keep that? sort of momentum up and that confidence and positivity?
Yeah, I guess surrounding yourself with good people. I mean, it's lovely that, you know, friends and family can boost you up, but I think also building a musical community around you where other musicians know what you're going through and you can sort of share the highs and lows together. Yeah, I would say that. Just make sure you've got a good network around you and, in particular, other musicians that you can really relate to and, yeah, sort of share the journey with. I think that's always a good thing to do as a starter.
Oh, that's great. And I think something that I've been hearing a lot with musicians that I've been talking about as well is it's along the same line. So dealing with rejection, I think there's quite a lot of that, as well as a lot of the things that we have been dealing with lately. But rejection is something that just keeps coming up. What do you think that maybe an artist can do in that? Like, if they do feel a little disheartened that they are getting constant rejections and maybe not getting the results that they want, how do you think that they can move past that?
That's a challenging question.
I'm asking the tough questions today.
Um, you know, I think there's that old saying, you know, if you do the same thing over and over and expect a different result, you know, you're on the borderline of something crazy. So you have to keep moving forward. You have to keep trying new things. Yeah, I think that's all you can do is just keep growing, keep learning. You know, try to keep the flow happening. There's always going to be some ups and downs and some bumps. Yeah, and I suppose look for the things that motivate you. Look for the people that inspire you. It might not be somebody that you know personally. It might be somebody online that you find you can just listen to, perhaps for a few minutes a day. Whether they're musicians or whether they're just other people that, you know, impart their wisdom. Just start to have the right positive signals coming in to give you some chance of getting through those knocks and continuing to grow, I guess. Yeah, it's not easy.
Great. No, it's not. And I guess, I mean, it's a challenging journey, isn't it?
Definitely.
So I guess if audience members are watching this and you have you'd like to give them some kind of key takeaway that they can kind of go away and learn a lesson to move forward a little bit further, what would you give? What kind of advice would you give them?
I think with all the noise out there and you know, trying to be noticed above it all, I would say to look at your branding, to really have a look at whether your branding is a strong representation of what you're really doing with your music, and whether it is keyed into the sort of the demographic that are interested in your music and what you do. And again, my course is free, so I'm not trying to sell anything, but if you go to the Music Marketing Machine, I think there's 2 or 3 modules on branding, and they're quite short, and they're just little exercises that you can do to really have a think about the look and the feel of your brand and the message that you're sending out there. Because I think, you know, first impression is everything, particularly online these days. You've really got to grab people. And so, yeah, I would certainly start with branding. And that is usually where I start with any musicians that I coach.
Yeah. Where do you feel that a lot of musicians do sort of fall down when it comes to their branding?
I think not really giving enough thought to what they're putting out there. And again, the connection it has to their music and what they're doing. You know, you can have a presence that isn't really representative of how you sound, and that can be very confusing for people if they see an image or they see your logo, your branding, and then when they click on it, it's not aligned with what you're doing creatively. That's a wasted opportunity, and I think it can be confusing for people. So, yeah. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And do you think that maybe if musicians are not quite sure about this, that they should really, really be seeking out professional advice to be able to build up that branding on point?
I do, but I don't think there's any need to pay for information or advice. There's so much free information out there on branding. It doesn't have to even be information on branding specifically for musicians. It can just be a cheap or a free course. There's heaps of stuff out there. So I'm not recommending that people spend money on getting advice. There's heaps of free information out there. And again, just tap into what other people that are successful in your genre are doing. Have a good look at what they're putting out there. And if they're successful, use that as an example or somewhere to start.
Oh, fantastic. And I did want to ask you as well, what, in your view, what do you think it is that actually defines success?
Well, it has to be about happiness, doesn't it, really? It just has to be about some inner peace. And again, if we're talking about musicians, that can be a tricky thing. How many ducks in a row do you need before you feel like you're achieving something positive, spreading your music and feeling good about yourself and your career? So, ultimately for me, success has to be from an inner good feeling about yourself and your creativity.
Right, excellent. I love that. That's beautiful. All right. So I guess you've always had a lot happening in your career. So I'm very interested to hear about if you've got anything big sort of planned in your near future that might be coming out.
Yes, loosely. Yeah. It's not a done deal. Not a done deal yet. But I am hoping that I'll open another Jimmy Hornet in 2021. The goal has always been to have a few Jimmy Hornet venues so that essentially we can create a bit of a circuit and more live performance opportunity. It's a weird time to be thinking about that. So that is, the times have made it a little tricky. But yeah, I still am fairly sure that I'll achieve that next year, and then I'll have 2 venues running. And at the moment, that's pretty much taking up all of my energy. So yeah, it's all just live venue for me at the moment.
Yeah, but I guess has it been helpful to you to kind of have a little bit of downtime to be able to plan that out a little bit more?
It has, definitely. And the Jimmy Hornet in Richmond has evolved each time it's reopened. We turned it this time from a bistro to a lounge, just to allow for some more social distancing. And that's really changed the vibe of the room in a positive way.
Okay.
So it has. It did allow me to sort of rethink what was working and what wasn't working and tweak things a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Is there anything further that maybe you might like to share before we finish up?
Oh, look, I think, just stay positive, stay together. Look, again, make sure you've got a good network around you. Shows like this are great. People like you are great that are out there sharing information and trying to unite people. And let those people into your lives as much as you can. That's all I would say, really, I think.
Oh, that's beautiful. And normally I ask where to find you, but people can find you at Jimmy Hornets and go online to jimmyhornets.com, and I'll put the link up in the chat so that everybody can find you and your courses. And thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Kaz. It's been nice to chat to you.